think the book of Revelation portrays the temple as still standing. And the angel stood saying, "Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein." The book of Revelation, when you read it, it's very clear that it's being written during this very chaotic time. It has all the fireworks of apocalyptic literature. That's the persecution, and that fits much better in the 60s. Contrast that with Nero, who takes out the two leading apostles, the apostle to the Gentiles and the apostle to the Jews, Paul and Peter. Imagine Paul and Peter being taken out, the destruction of the temple, 4 emperors in Rome convulsing in civil war. Which one sounds more like the period of Revelation? Him saying at the beginning of the book and at the end of the book, these are things that must shortly come to pass. Time's at hand, it's near, it's at the door. If he were trying to say it was close, I don't know how he could make it any clearer.
Hey, Stephen, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I had seen a couple of YouTube videos on your channel, and that's usually how I find some guests, and reached out, and I was grateful that you responded and wanted to come on and talk. So I wanted to get a little background with you, but just to give people an idea, we're going to talk tonight about the book of Revelation and when it was written. There's always, for years I've heard this back and forth of the popular AD 95, and then there's, of course, some period during the 60s, possibly AD 66, 8, 68, somewhere in there. So maybe you can help clarify that and give your reasons why you think it is what you believe. So, but first, why don't you give a little background about yourself, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, thanks. So I am a Greek instructor by the evening.
Wow.
I work for a company called Biblical Mastery Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make it clear that I'm only representing my own views here and not necessarily those of Biblical Mastery Academy, but
Gotcha.
don't want to get them in trouble. But I work in the day as a supervisor at a construction company, and just love the Bible. They endure my preaching at the local church I attend, and just start a YouTube channel just to kind of really nerd out a little bit on some of the things that interest me. And so basically that's what I do on my YouTube channel, is I just kind of follow my interest, and one of those things is the book of Revelation. And so that's a little bit about me.
All right. So what are some of those things, real quick, that you might cover that people could find and listen to some of the topics that you cover on your YouTube channel?
So I cover quite a few different things. Lately, I've been talking a lot about the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And so that's been something that a lot of people have been interested in. And so that's one topic I've talked a lot about. I talk about what's called textual criticism a lot, which has to do with our manuscripts of the New Testament. I do talk a little bit about biblical Greek. I also talk about eschatology, and pretty much anything else that pops up that I'm interested in, Bible related, biblical studies related. It's fair game. So, yeah.
I just recently got a Septuagint, and I know there's different ones out there. I don't remember the name of this one. It's over on the bookshelf, but I'm eager to dive into it and start reading some of it has some of the other apocryphal books in it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I noticed as I was preparing for this interview, I noticed that you had a lot of material from Michael Heiser. And what's interesting is that he was an Old Testament scholar, obviously. And so he brought in a lot of people on my channel are fans of Michael Heiser. A lot of people who watch my channel, that is, are fans of Michael Heiser. And they really enjoyed these things that you can pull out from the New Testament in regards to quotations from the Old Testament more closely aligned with the Septuagint.
Right.
And you can see certain ideas that carry over and make more sense sometimes when you see it in a Greek translation of the Old Testament. So it's kind of interesting. There's some crossover there between those subjects.
Yeah, those are pretty awesome when he or somebody finds those crossover things and kind of makes those connections. it's like, he's always about getting into the mind of the writer. And so New Testament writers are thinking in these terms. And so it's kind of interesting. I like it anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it's really fascinating. And in fact, before I got on to, this evening, I was working on a video and how the early church fathers used the Septuagint. And it was kind of interesting because Justin Martyr, who is really early, so we're talking early 100s, the debate about Deuteronomy 32 and, is it talking about he set the boundaries according to the sons of Israel, or he set the boundaries according to the sons of God? Actually, Justin Martyr touches on that, right?
Really?
And he's actually debating with Trypho, the Jew, and says, well, your scriptures don't say this, but our edition says angels of God. And so in that video that I was pre-recording, I was talking about how it's interesting that debate about the correct reading of Deuteronomy 32 has carried it all the way down to our age today, so it's an ancient debate.
I didn't know about that angels of God phrase.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Deuteronomy, so when he sets the boundaries of the people, the nations, he either sets it according to the sons of God, which would be what the Dead Sea Scrolls say, or he sets it according to the angels of God, which is what the Septuagint says, or the children of Israel, which is what the Masoretic text says, the Hebrew text. So the Septuagint looks like it was probably, their original text probably had something like sons of God, like the Dead Sea Scrolls have now, and the Masoretic text. Somewhere along the way, that textual variant crept in, and so it's pretty significant in a lot of ways.
So I know this wasn't what we were planning to talk about, but just to be clear, because I'm interested, obviously, what do you think is the correct one? That Michael Heiser is right in his idea that they're angels?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the right reading there. I am very reluctant to give up any readings from our standard Hebrew Bible Masoretic text. But this one has Dead Sea Scroll support. It has Septuagint also backing it up. And it actually just makes a lot of sense in ways that the making it the sons of Israel doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so really I would credit Heiser for persuading me that that's the correct reading there. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, it sounds like we could probably go off on all kinds of things for a couple hours, but
sure.
Why don't we jump into Revelation and why you come to the conclusion on the one that you do? So let's just say, when do you think it was written?
Yeah. So I think it was written during the reign of Nero, and that puts it around the 60s, mid 60s. That does contrast with probably the majority of what people have heard, which would date it into the 90s during the time of Domitian. So, I think there's a number of reasons why the early date makes sense. And by the way, the early date, which would be like the 60s prior to AD 70, was at one time the majority view. So scholarship sometimes shifts back and forth one way or the other. So what the majority view is now, to me, isn't that important. What I'm more concerned about is the evidence. And so in the 19th century, the majority view was that it was written prior to AD 70. The evidence really hasn't just changed. It's just that, in my opinion, groupthink is a real thing. And
no kidding.
Things get popular, and that's how it goes. And so even some of the scholars today that would support a late day, they do so with a little bit of hesitation. So you'll read the introduction, a commentary to Revelation, and even if they support a late date, they'll often do it with a furrowed brow. But just to walk through, to answer your question, walk through a few reasons why I think it is. I think one of the biggest reasons is I think the book of Revelation portrays the temple as still standing. So in Revelation chapter 11, you have John being told to measure the city and the temple that's still in there, still in the city, that is. I also think that there's the book of Revelation, when you read it, it's very clear that's being written during this very chaotic time. It has all the fireworks of apocalyptic literature. That's the persecution and all of that stuff going on. That fits much better in the 60s than it does in the relatively tranquil period under Domitian.
Right.
So in the 60s, you have Nero, who's begun persecuting the church. You have the outbreak of the Jewish War, and Rome itself goes into convulsions in the year of the 4 emperors. I mean, imagine if you were in the United States and you had 4 presidents reigning all in one year. That's about what was happening in the 60s. Wow. So there's, the way I like to say is it fits the fireworks of Revelation much better. And one of the other problems is Revelation is with one of the other problems with the late date is Revelation is predicting a hour of trial, which is about to come upon the whole world. And one of the problems is the evidence for a Domitian persecution has come under real heavy scrutiny. So I actually have a quote from Mark Wilson. He wrote, I don't know if I've got it handy here, but he wrote the Bible background commentary from Zondervan. He did his dissertation on the 7 churches of Asia, and he wrote this. He said, the fake news that Domitian instigated a severe persecution of Christians and that his claim to be master and God provoked this persecution needs to be removed from our facts about the early church. And I could give you another quote, but I don't want to bore your audience with all these quotes. But Brian Jones, he's a Roman historian. He's a recent biographer of Domitian. And he says this: no convincing evidence exists for a Domitianic persecution of the Christians. Right. So if there's no Domitianic persecution of the Christians, it doesn't seem to fit very well at all. The context of what's going on here. Contrast that with Nero, who takes out the 2 leading apostles, the apostle to the Gentiles and the apostle to the Jews, Paul and Peter. Imagine Paul and Peter being taken out, the destruction of the temple, 4 emperors in Rome convulsing in civil war. Which one sounds more like the period of Revelation?
Right.
And to me, it's pretty clear. So, I mean, I could go on with more and more evidence, but I'll mention also the counting of kings. So I think Revelation itself gives us a time element when it was written. It talks about what I believe portrays the Roman Empire. It says there's 5 kings that have fallen. Mm-hmm. One is, and the other has not yet come. If you lived in the 1st century and you were trying to count the kings of the Roman Empire, it'd be really clear where to start. You would start with Julius Caesar and work your way down. So if you go to Julius Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and then Nero being the 6th that is, it fits just perfectly well to the timing. Mm-hmm. And again, Revelation has this idea of this imminence of events that are about to take place. The time is at hand. Some people read the book of Revelation as if it had no relevance to that 1st century audience, and I think that's just to strip Revelation of its practical implications to that group of people during that time. So that's just to sketch out a few things. I mean, there's more that we could go into, but just to sketch out a few reasons why I think the book of Revelation probably was written in the 60s. I'll just say this too. This is not an issue that Christians need to divide over at all. It's a secondary issue. It's a fun one. It's really fascinating. Yeah. And I think it has significance, but it's not anything that I would go to war over. I don't want to die on a mountain like this one, but I think it's fascinating.
You mentioned that there was some evidence that the temple was still standing. Did you have a specific scripture or anything that kind of suggested that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So in Revelation chapter 1, and I actually will just pull it up here. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of old-fashioned sometimes. I do use the computer for a Bible, but I like the paper Bible sometimes. Revelation chapter 11, verse 1. He said, there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 40 and 2 months. So right there, the temple is portrayed as still standing for John to go ahead and measure it. And this evidence, I think, is really interesting because it's hard to dismiss. So you can take a scholar who's on more of the liberal side. So I would be very conservative, but you can take a very liberal scholar who wrote one of the most popular commentaries on the book of Revelation, was R.H. Charles. And he was basically, this is kind of when the tide kind of began to shift back towards a late date. And some of his work was instrumental. But he came to Revelation chapter 11 and he said, basically, that looks pre-70 to me. And so he made the book of Revelation, not just for this reason, but for a number of reasons. He basically made the book of Revelation a composite document. Some of it would date back. John borrowed some material here and there, and it all got stitched together. But this is pre-70 material. Mm-hmm. But if you're like me and you think that John actually did receive a whole revelation at one time, it makes far more sense that the temple was actually standing when he was told to rise and measure the temple.
Yeah, well, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of Revelation is John writing in code to specific people, like the 7 churches, for example, so that it wouldn't get confiscated and not delivered and something like that?
It could be. One of the things I like to emphasize to people, that could be part of it, but I think I think it's, and this isn't an original illustration with me, but I think it's more like I don't want to trivialize it by saying this, but the best illustration I think is like a political cartoon, because a political cartoon is not designed to obscure something, it's designed to reveal something.
Right.
So when you see the donkey and you see the elephant, they're not trying to obscure the identity of the Democrat and the Republican Party. Actually, they're trying to illustrate something about that. Yeah. And so the book of Revelation is conveying things, he says, signifying or communicating by signs and giving the true spiritual reality of things. And so I think one of the reasons why people have trouble with the Revelation, and we all do on some levels, but is they don't take seriously when an angel will authoritatively interpret what one of those symbols are for us and turn that into another symbol.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the book of Revelation, if you understand the timing, if there's no time element to it, it could be fulfilled at any point. And by the way, I'm not a hyper-preterist. For your listeners, a hyper-preterist is someone who thinks everything has been fulfilled. Yeah. I don't believe that. I still think there's a second coming. I don't think everything in the book of Revelation is fulfilled. That's not my view. But him saying at the beginning of the book and at the end of the book, these are things that must shortly come to pass, I would think it would be quite a disservice that if a good deal of it didn't have some sort of relevance or fulfillment in the first century, then it almost sort of makes a mockery of all these time elements, like over and over. Like if you didn't get it the first time, he's going to repeat it 3 chapters later, time and time again. The time's at hand, it's near, it's at the door. It's like, if he were trying to say it was close, I don't know how he could make it any clearer. Yeah. But then I think once you understand that it is talking about, a lot of it's talking about events that are right at their door. They say the Bible was written for us, but not to us. Mm-hmm. Once you understand their framework, I think a lot of these symbols make sense, and the whole drama of the book sort of opens up for you.
All right. Well, so I actually have heard a lot of people talking about this scripture we just read about the temple. It seems like the temple is still there in Jerusalem, and they're saying that this is prophetic, and it's talking about the future 3rd temple that needs to be built. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's interesting is I held that view myself at one point in life. Yeah. And so I'm very familiar with it. And that underscores, I think, when you read this text, it does seem like he's talking about an actual city, an actual temple. So I think it actually, on one level, strengthens the case that I'm making here today. Mm. But John seems to show no awareness that a temple has fallen. So imagine, for example, if you were writing the history of New York City and you got to about 2000 and let's say we found a document that's written a history about New York City, and we weren't sure exactly when it was written, but let's say we knew it was around the 2000s, and they just casually start talking about the Twin Towers, right? And so we're trying to date when this book would be written. I don't think anybody would reasonably say that this book was written in 2002 if they're talking about the Twin Towers and they don't happen to mention that it just had fallen.
Right.
And that's sort of the circumstance you have here. John, we know he's writing in the late first century, but he's talking about the temple, and he makes no mention at all that this temple has fallen. Now, you might say that's an argument from silence, and in a sense, you're right. A person would be right to say that, but this is a deafening silence. This would be John is living. This for a first century Jew. For you and I, Damon, when the Twin Towers, you remember where you were.
Mm-hmm.
I do too.
I do. Yeah.
And this would be even more devastating for him. And just to casually mention measuring the temple. This contrast, for example, so sharply with Ezekiel. Ezekiel also talks about a temple, a future temple, from Ezekiel's standpoint, whether it's symbolic or whatever. But very, very clearly in Ezekiel chapter 33, before he ever gets to that temple, he says one of the refugees has come to him and told him that the city has been sacked. Jeremiah does it. Ezekiel does it. Daniel does it. There's this is not just a coincidence. This is a prophetic pattern that when something traumatic like this has happened, the prophet mentions it. And so, yes, John is looking forward to a heavenly Jerusalem. He is looking forward to that. But when you read about the heavenly Jerusalem, it doesn't sound like this. This sounds like something that's standing, that's about to, he says the Gentiles are going to tread it down for 42 months. And he shows no inclination to think that everything's been fallen. If that were the case, you'd expect him to say something to the effect of, yeah, the city has fallen, but guys, be of good cheer that, the city's going to be built again. And, like Daniel does, the city shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So that's what you would expect. Further than that, I think it's nailed down. If you believe in the principle, and I think most people will, that Scripture interprets Scripture, almost everybody agrees that Matthew 21 and verse 24 are referring to the destruction of Jerusalem AD 70. Even dispensationalists usually will grant that point. The same wording, if you put Luke 21, 24 and Revelation 11:2, you put those side by side, and if you read Revelation 11:2, but leave out the court which is outside the temple and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they shall tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. You have three elements there. You have the Gentiles, you have the treading, and you have the holy city. If you look at Luke 21:24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive in all nations, and Jerusalem, that corresponds to holy city, will be trampled, which corresponds to the trampling in Revelation 11. And you have a time element until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That corresponds. So you put these lined up. It can't just be a coincidence. In fact, I like what a lot of commentators have said, even late date advocates will say this sometimes, is that all three of the synoptic gospels have an Olivet discourse.
Right.
And if you think of it, this is almost like this is John's Olivet discourse. In fact, if you compare the Olivet discourse of Matthew 24, you put it up parallel to Revelation chapter 6, time and time again, and again, commentators from all different backgrounds will acknowledge this. You see these lining up over and over again. So to me, that just makes a lot of sense of this.
Yeah, I never heard that before, John's Olivet discourse. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you say about, or have you heard anything about the wars going on during this time leading up to 70 AD and it being 3.5 years, 42 months? Is there any historical evidence of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Jewish war did last, from the beginning of the Jewish outbreak until the fall of Jerusalem was roughly about 3.5 years. There was a period of time, there's a mopping up that follows that, which was, again, give or take about 3.5 years. So you actually have about a 7-year period here with Jerusalem getting sacked pretty close to the middle of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
So would you call that the Great Tribulation?
Yeah, I think that was the tribulation that Jesus referred to when he talked about a tribulation that was coming. So yes, with this one thing that I would say is that, from my view, is that my study of prophecy is that you can have a prophetic fulfillment, and that will be pretty much the interpretation of that passage, and then also have further significance. So, for example, in Matthew chapter 2, it is, I think, where he quotes Hosea. He says, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." Well, then go back to Hosea, where he's quoted that from, and it's pretty clear contextually that he's actually talking about the nation of Israel. I don't think Matthew's made a mistake there.
Right.
What he's doing is he's seeing the full significance of that. In other words, Jesus has gone into Egypt as a babe, and now he's come out of Egypt, as it were. He's gone through the waters of baptism. He's gone out into the wilderness. What is he doing? Why did he spend 40 days out in the wilderness? Israel spent 40 years out in the wilderness. Why did he go through the waters of baptism, which Paul likens to the children of Israel when they were all baptized in the Red Sea? In other words, what he's doing is he's taking on Israel's vocation, and he is Israel's faithful representative, and he is fulfilling the things that Israel couldn't do. He called them to be the light of the world, but he takes that vocation on himself and becomes Israel's faithful representative. So it's not as if Matthew doesn't know his Old Testament. He's just plucking out random verses.
Yeah.
He's seeing their full significance coming into play in the life and ministry of Jesus. Why is that relevant? It's because that's not just something that happens one-off in the Old Testament. When you study biblical prophecy, to me, it works like a symphony. Just like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, you'll hear that da-da-da-dum, but then you'll hear that repeated over and over and over again until it finally climaxes. And I think that's what's going on in the book of Revelation, is that it gives us a microcosm, as it were, of what could indeed happen on a global scale as well. So I look at it as a pattern and template. I think it had a fulfillment there, but I don't think its full significance is done. And I think there's reasons to maybe even suggest that from Revelation itself. So in Revelation chapter 10, John is told to eat a book, and then he says, in verse 11, Revelation 10:11, "And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings." Now, I could be wrong about my interpretation here, but it just seems to me, I don't think John the Baptist, or John the Revelator, John the Apostle John, is going to come back from the dead right at the end times to prophesy again. But I do think that his message might have further relevance for future generations.
So you had mentioned Nero was in power during this time, you believe, during the time of John writing Revelation. So is there any textual evidence in Revelation that he was there? Does he show up at all? What kind of role did he play during this period of time?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So you'd mentioned, was Revelation maybe written in code? And here's the one point where I think it may have been written in a little bit of code.
Okay.
So I think in general, it's a revelation, not a concealing. So it's meant to reveal things. But at the end of Revelation chapter 13, it says, Yeah, I'll just start in verse 16. And we're all familiar with the talking about the image of the beast and the taking the mark. But he
Hmm.
says, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 600, threescore and six, 600, 666.
Hmm.
And I heard Doug Wilson say this one time, so I'm going to borrow a line from him. So he says, when he says, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count. He's expecting some sophisticated sophomore, as it were, to start, calculating and trying to figure out this this mystery. And he
Yeah.
says, he just pictures him, and he's working all this out, and he says, I've got it. But who is Henry Kissinger?
Oh my gosh.
Well, what's really interesting is what you have, and what they would have understood in the first century is that you're probably going to understand this by an ancient form of calculation, and where you substitute letters for numbers. So, like in Greek, you would have, alpha might stand for 1, etc. But when you put Caesar's name, or Nero Caesar's name, in Hebrew, it comes out to 666.
Wow.
Again, that seems like a very odd coincidence. And what
Right.
makes it even more striking is that Irenaeus, one of the early church writers, was aware that some manuscripts were floating around during his period of time that instead of having 666, read 616. And what's fascinating about that is there's an alternative spelling to Nero's name, which actually
Right.
comes out to 616.
Oh my
So
gosh.
what that suggests is that there were people during that period of time who were reading it this way and said, oh, no, we've got to fix the number to get the spelling right. So they've actually found a Greek manuscript that has that 616 reading. So I think this provides powerful support that the book of Revelation essentially has written Nero's name right into Revelation chapter 13.
Oh wow. So by implication, John is thinking this is the man of perdition, the one who's going to defile the temple.
Yeah, I think that John has got his eyes set on him as, yes, there is a little interplay between heads, like the head of the beast and the beast himself, but I think he has identified him as this beast of the book of Revelation. I am fascinated also with Second Thessalonians, which will take us afield. I don't actually identify the man of perdition in Second Thessalonians as Nero.
Okay.
But that's a whole different topic. Yeah. But actually, it is related in some ways. But yeah, but I do think he plays a major role here in Revelation chapter 13.
Well, he was killing Christians and doing all kinds of things, so he was definitely not good role in this period of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, just the fact that he took out Peter and Paul. I can't imagine the havoc. I mean, if that's all he had done, and you read about Nero was not a good guy. The people were writing about and fearing that he might come back from the dead during this period of time in secular literature of the time. I mean, he was what Hitler is to us in the ancient world. So if you want to call somebody a bad guy, right, you call him Hitler now. That's the name that you pull out. You don't pull Domitian out. You pull Nero out because he's the quintessential evil bad guy. During that period of time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, all this stuff, like even the history of it, I know there's not a lot of written history, but the stuff that we do know is really fascinating, and I enjoy talking about it. And you really seem to know a lot about it. So for everyone watching, feel free to go to Stephen's YouTube channel and check it all out. What is the name of your channel?
Biblical Studies and Reviews. Stephen Hackett. So I got it all in there. I got my name in there too. So Biblical Studies and Reviews, Stephen Hackett. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. I appreciate you coming on and talking with us about all this stuff, and maybe we'll do something again sometime soon. Again, thank you very much, and have a great night.
All right. Thank you.